Hello friends, for today's video I'm going to be going through some adult fantasy book recommendations that are not Sanderson. I do talk about Sanderson quite a bit on my channel, so I like having this style of video from time to time to kind of balance out all of the Sanderson content. And also I know some of you are big fans of Sanderson already, but sometimes you're looking for other books that are not him. So that's what today's video is. I'll have all the other ones I've done in the past linked below because I've done this video quite a bit, so if you want more recommendations, you can check that out. Before jumping into it, a big thank you to GlassesUSA.com for working with me on today's video. I was thinking about it and I actually haven't been to a glasses store since I was in college, and I am coming up on 30 years old now, so that tells you how long it's been. And that's because I have been using Glasses USA for so long. I always say I've been using them since before I ever worked with them because I just truly really love their service. It's where I get all of my glasses. You obviously can get prescription glasses and prescription sunglasses. You can also get transitions lenses, and you can get glasses without prescriptions in case you just want a regular pair of sunglasses or those sorts of things. They have so much more of a variety of glasses to choose from than you would get typically if you go into a store. They have in-house brands, they have name brands, and then they also have a try-on feature. Previously, you could upload a photo of yourself and it would show you what the glasses look like, but now they actually have it where you can just have your camera, and as you're moving and in real time, it will show you what the glasses look like. So I just think it takes the virtual try-on feature to the next level. And if also you've forgotten your prescription and you don't want to have to go down to your eye doctor, you can actually use their app to scan your current lenses and it will figure out your prescription for you. So it's all very, very convenient. It's also a much more affordable option because it takes that middleman out of the equation. It just ships them directly to your home. I'm pretty much always wearing this clear pair just because I feel like it matches everything. But every now and then, if I feel like mixing it up, there is this particular pair of kind of your classic black pair of glasses that I really, really like. And a lot of you actually helped me select this pair. They have that hint of the cat eye at the top. And then I mentioned before that they have transitions lenses, and you can get those put into one of their regular frames. So I have a pair of Ray-Bans that are kind of that classic circle shape, and because of the lights that I have in here, you can see already how they are changing in color. If you are interested in checking GlassesUSA.com out, I will have them linked in the description bar down below. Thank you again to them for working with me today. Thank you again for continuing to work with me. Now back to our video. I'm going to jump right into it with some standalones. So the first one I'm going to start with would be Ruination. This is in the League of Legends world, which would be what the Netflix show Arcane is, and then also, of course, the League of Legends video game where it all kind of started. So this is not going to have the same characters from the Arcane show. You're actually going to be looking at a different area and a different time. The setup for this is we follow a young woman named Callista. Her uncle, who is roughly the same age as her, and therefore is more like a brother, has found himself now the leader of their country, and he is somebody who, while he's trying his best, he really isn't the best leader, and he is getting better as a result of the input from his wife Isolde. He also is deeply in love with Isolde, but then something happens that puts Isolde's life in danger, and Callista finds that despite her being an expert in combat, she is now being sent on this quest to see if she can find a way to heal Isolde. So on this quest, she is looking for this hidden magical island that is shrouded in mystery. Nobody really thinks that it actually exists. And while on this quest, not only does she discover that maybe there's some truth to some of the lore, there's also maybe some other aspects of it that have never been revealed. After that, we have Legends and Lattes, drastically different from Ruination. This one follows a orc whose name is Viv, who is tired of the life of battle, so she decides she's going to retire from that life and she's going to start anew by opening a coffee shop. This, I think, put cozy fantasy on the map for a lot of people, and I think it kind of filled a void a lot of us didn't realize that we wanted in the fantasy genre, because as this says at the top, a novel of high fantasy and low stakes, we are so entrenched in our emotions being ripped apart, our hearts being squished, and all of our hopes being shattered all the time in some of the books we're reading. And it's nice to every now and then just read something that's relaxing and fun and cozy. After that, we have the Book of Gothel. This is much more historical fiction, I would say, than it is fantasy. For a lot of the book, I was curious as to whether there actually was going to be a form of fantasy in this, or if it was more of the folklore and the beliefs make the characters think that certain natural events are actually influenced by something fantastical, but there are some fantasy elements sprinkled in. This follows, as you might expect from the title, the character of Gothel, the character that is the villain in the Rapunzel story. I think that concept leads us to believe it's going to be much more fairy tale-like, but really this is not. This truly is much more like historical fiction, and this is a young woman who there are things about her within her society that definitely label her as odd, and people, they do not treat odd individuals well, especially at the time that this takes place. There is a lot of religious fear that is motivating people to mistreat her. So she's just trying to get by and trying to survive. And she is also somebody who desperately longs for a family. She desperately longs to feel some kind of connection with other people. She just basically wants a nice, peaceful life. And it's society that doesn't seem to want to give that to her. And so you're following her in a kind of slower going story as she is doing what she can to get by. Speaking of fantasy that feels a little more historical fiction heavy, next up we have Babel by R.F. Kuang. I likely don't even really need to say a whole lot about this book because I think most of you have already heard about it and heard plenty about it. But essentially, we are seeing R.F. Kuang take her expertise both in history and language and combine those to give us a historical fantasy where we see the way that language has been utilized to try and conquer other peoples and how that was something that was truly a tool that the British Empire used. But then you also see her combine this with a very interesting magic system that has to do with silver. Our main character, Robin, is somebody who was specifically chosen to attend Oxford because of the fact that he grew up bilingual and therefore has fluency in multiple languages, which is necessary for the way their magic system works. If you like the gray morality and characters having to question their role in a destructive society, then I think you'll probably really enjoy Babel. Next up, we have Arrows of the Queen by Mercedes Lackey. If you're somebody who really enjoys that Sanderson's adult fantasy works are interconnected through the Cosmere, then you might want to give this a try. The reason being, this particular world, the Valdemar books, there's so many books within this, and there's various different standalones and series that follow different characters. This particular one follows Talia, and I will say it was written in the 80s, and there are certain things about it being written in the 80s that are noticeable. For example, you're going to see some tropes that I think a lot of us are very, very tired of seeing, but it was so long ago that at that point they weren't overused, they hadn't turned into cliches. So you might have to go into this with just that knowledge of, okay, this is older, so there's going to be a couple things that I have to be a little bit more patient with than I maybe would with a new release. That said, this is also very ahead of its time with certain elements, so I don't think you have to worry about it being a bore. It's not going to be dull. It's not going to have something where just page after page is frustrating you. It's just something like sometimes characters, you just want them to talk to each other, miscommunication or lack of communication, that sort of thing. But regardless, the very first book, Arrows of the Queen, is one of the most beautiful, lovely, heartwarming coming-of-age stories. We follow this young girl named Talia who has grown up in this rather rural community, and her own family is so gripped by the expectations of what women are supposed to do and what men are supposed to do. And Talia, being a young girl, she's finding that as she's coming up in age, she's likely going to be married off very soon. Talia does not want this life for herself. What she wants is to become a herald, which is a being who is chosen for their pureness of heart by what is basically a magical animal that can sense that pureness. And these individuals then serve the queen. And that is what she wants for herself. And then one day a beautiful horse shows up and chooses Talia. And then from there, she's kind of whisked off to this kind of sort of magic school. It's not going to have the magic school setting of you're following her from class to class all the time necessarily, but just you're seeing her now around other people who are much more supportive of her, that are trying to build a healthy relationship between herself and others, and even just self-love and accepting who she is. There's some adorable relationships that occur. There's one between her and this elderly man, and they bond over their love of music. And there's just that first book, Arrows of the Queen. It's one of my favorite books I've read this year. It's gonna always hold a special place in my heart just because it was so beautiful to see the way that these adult figures were trying to develop this young girl into somebody who loved herself, who enjoyed life, who found a sense of purpose, and you're just like, oh, it's so wholesome. So if you're looking for something wholesome, that first book will do the trick. That said, as Talia gets older throughout the trilogy, it gets much heavier and much, much darker, so just be warned. Last for today, we have a new release, and that would be Godkiller. I did a whole in-depth review for this because I really enjoyed it. It is shockingly short, and I say shockingly because the amount of story that is here and the amount that the plot unfolds and the amount that you get to know the characters does not seem possible within such a short amount of time, but the author accomplished it. So this is a very action-packed, fantasy-heavy story. We follow a society that has been fractured by battles between the gods and eventually battles that humans found themselves within. And then humans one day turned on the gods because they realized that the gods have far more power against us, and no matter whose side we're on, at some point the gods are always going to demand too much of us, and so they try to rid their society of gods. And gods are not entirely wiped out. So there are now beings known as Vegas who are god hunters, as you would expect by the title Godkiller, and one of our main characters, Kissin, is a Vega. Kissin finds herself suddenly paired with this young girl who has this magical bond with one of the gods that should not be possible, and typically Kissin would destroy the god. However, if she kills the god, it will likely kill this little girl as well. So now Kissin is trying to help this young girl figure out a way to separate herself from this god. The god is kind of cute. It's this animal-like being, but it also has some tendencies that lean into some of that darker territory that caused human beings to turn against gods in the first place. Some other interesting aspects of the world building is that you see not every human was okay with the way that they turned on the gods. There are some people that want to continue to worship and that want to continue to have their faith, and so that plays a role in humans now kind of going against each other and there being this tension that's building. It also leads some people to not care whatsoever for Kissin and her profession. And then you also have one additional character who was a knight during the wars, and this character is then part of their journey as well. It was really fun. It was really interesting. It was great to see the development of these characters. It was great to see their development with each other. Overall, really enjoyed this one. And I wish the sequel was out already. That's it for some adult fantasy recommendations that are not Sanderson. Hopefully there was something here that sounded interesting or something that you might want to try. I hope whatever you pick up, you end up enjoying. If you would like more fantasy recommendations that aren't Sanderson, like I said, I'll have my other videos linked. But anyway, feel free to let me know your recommendations in the comments down below. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.